Hi, welcome to Tuesdays with Jakey. I'm gonna be under the gun a little bit to record this because I gotta go into town in a little while. I'll get into that in a minute. It is Tuesday, August 10th, 2021, and remember like a year ago we were all kind of talking to each other about um, COVID and like how it was almost over and by the fall everything would be back to normal. And now everything's getting canceled, and I just read that Shinedown canceled a bunch of tour dates, Leonard Skinner canceled a bunch of tour dates, Fall Out Boy dropped off their Weezer and Green Day tour. Um, but shows are still happening, and I've been seeing people post all weekend. And I was at a music festival all weekend. I was at the Yellow Pine Harmonica Fest up in Yellow Pine, Idaho, where I've been working as a bartender. And I was in a crowded bar all weekend with no mask on, serving all sorts of backcountry folks. Really, like half backcountry folks, and a lot of people came up from Boise and Salt Lake, and I met someone who came from San Antonio, and there were like 1,500 people descended into the beautiful little backcountry dirt road town of Yellow Pine, Idaho for the 32nd annual, I guess technically 31st because they didn't do it last year, but what should be the 32nd annual Harmonica Fest. And boy, what a trip. It was yeah, it was interesting. It was interesting. I've been in that town since beginning of July every weekend. And so this was my sixth weekend. And I'd been there a couple times in June as well. And it's a very sleepy little town, and you don't see that many people. And like every now and then we'd have a decent crowd of like 20 to 30 people on a Friday or Saturday night. But we probably had like 60 or 70 people in the tavern all weekend. At any given time, sometimes probably more, closer to 100. And we had the windows open, ceiling fans going, back door open, fans blowing all around. And I brought masks, and I thought about wearing them, and I thought about different strategies for how to wear a mask, but in the end I just decided to go without, because I knew it was going to be a lot of Republican people, and I just didn't want to be having arguments all weekend and people not being able to hear me and not getting tips. And so I'm a little nervous. I don't feel sick at all, but I'm gonna go get a COVID test today and hopefully get my result before I go back up there on Thursday. Because if I am positive, I don't want to be spreading shit. Um, but I was up there for 2 weeks. I guess 11 days, and without coming back here to McCall, which is oddly though it's the longest I've been away from McCall since I got here, or since I got here last June, but I decided to live here in September. I hadn't been away for that long, and it was nice to get away, even though I wasn't that far away. I've said this before, but 27 miles as the crow flies, but 62-mile drive from here if you go one way, 77 miles if you go the other way. But it's so remote, and it's so cool. And yeah, it was really cool to see so many people in the town and people having a good time. And I gotta say, there were less harmonicas than I imagined there would be, which was pretty cool. That was definitely a bonus. But at one point on Wednesday afternoon, a guy came into the bar and just started blowing on his harmonica, and I just kind of like, I looked like a cat that was angry, like my whole back went up, and I was like, ah, and I was like, what have I gotten myself into? What's going to be happening all weekend? Am I just going to be hearing nothing but harmonicas? But turned out it was just basically a roots and Americana music festival. There's another bar in that town called The Corner, and they had music in their bar. We had music in the tavern. Every day from noon to 2 a.m. there was music. Every 2 hours there was a new band. Every hour and 45 minutes or whatever, like 15 minutes to break down and set up the next band. And yeah, it was all, most of the acts had a harmonica, but it wasn't like just harmonica music, which was great. And I learned that like there's certain songs that everybody had to play. Pretty much every act played Can't You See by the Marshall Tucker Band, Simple Man by Leonard Skinner, Wagon Wheel by whoever that's by, Old Crow Medicine Show, kind of by Bob Dylan, I guess. I don't know if the history of that song is that it was an old, half-completed Bob Dylan song that Old Crow Medicine Show got their hands on and turned into a full song. And I bet Bob Dylan feels when he hears that song, if he's ever even heard it. I would imagine he might have heard it once, the completed version, or maybe he hears it like if he walks into a grocery store. But I imagine Bob Dylan's reaction is probably like mine was when I heard that guy honking on his harmonica, just like, ugh. Because Wagon Wheel is a great song in that it gets stuck in your head, and you can't forget it, but it's also a fucking awful song. Kind of like I Would Walk 500 Miles, or She Drives Me Crazy by the Fine Young Cannibals, or Everybody Wants to Rule the World by Tears for Fears. Those are songs that are great songs, obviously, because they're huge hits and everyone in the world knows them. But they're fucking terrible songs, and they make me upset when I hear them, and I don't ever want to hear Wagon Wheel again. Especially not Darius Rucker's version. But everyone played Wagon Wheel. They played Midnight Rider by the Allman Brothers. And, then a mix of covers and originals. I was proud to say, though, that other than Wagon Wheel, all the songs that I heard repeatedly over the weekend are all songs that I've put on the Yellow Pine Chestnuts playlist, which I just put on shuffle every day when I show up at the tavern. Which made me proud because I was like, I went up there to work one weekend, and then I started putting a playlist together, and it's over 900 songs now. And I'd say like 800 of those songs belong being played in that tavern, and another 100 are a mix. I'd say like 95 of the other 100 are just great rock and roll songs that I want to hear. But the gist of the playlist is it's old school country, blues, Motown, like just old rock and roll classics like Chuck Berry, Elvis Presley, Jerry Lee Lewis, Little Richard, of course, lots of Little Richard, Sam Cooke, just old good-timey music. This is an old good-timey bar, and obviously a lot of country blues, and but then there's a handful of songs that I put on there just to make myself laugh. And the other day, Lady Gaga's Born This Way came on, and it just makes me smile to hear stuff like that up there. And a fair amount of Ween. And I've gotten a lot of people, a surprising amount of people, whenever Ween comes on, have been like, oh my God, you're playing Ween. Oh, this is great. Fair amount of Grateful Dead. Probably too much, as I've learned with these playlists on shuffle. Maybe too much Grateful Dead. A couple of Moe songs that I think I have to get rid of. I have Plane Crash on there, and Plane Crash, Stranger Than Fiction, and Happy Hour Hero. Happy Hour Hero basically can stay on, but I gotta get rid of the other two, because every time they come on, I'm like, why did I put this on? So I gotta delete those. I love you, Moe, but you don't fit in the Yellow Pine Tavern for whatever reason. Yeah, it was just fun. I don't know, to kind of be around a festival atmosphere, and I didn't know how sort of janky the whole operation would be, and it was less janky than I thought. They trucked in this stage that was built completely out of wood, not like one of those collapsible stages. I don't know how they got it over Johnson Creek, which is the road they came in on, a 26-mile dirt road over a 7,000-mile peak. That comes in from the south over Warm Lake. I usually come in on a 52-mile dirt road over a 7,000-mile peak that comes in from McCall, comes in from the west. And I actually, I said I was in Yellow Pine for 11 days, but I went out one day down to Smith's Ferry to meet a friend, and we played in the river. And it was my one day off in those 11 days. So in the morning I headed out, and I was headed down Johnson Creek. It's a rough dirt road, and this big flatbed truck with 27 porta potties on it was coming the other way, and I had to pull over to make room for him. And I was like, I know where that's going. And yeah, I don't know how they got that stage in, because it's all built out of wood, which means it's going to be super fucking heavy, and it didn't collapse. So I don't even know how they got it through some of those tree clearings, but obviously they did. And then there was another outdoor stage, and then there was just music kind of like breaking out everywhere. People were like, having little guitar jams in the street, in the dusty dirt roads, which was cool. And it was, I gotta say, it was nice to be around live music. I went to a show a couple of weeks ago down in Boise. I went to see Built to Spill, and I don't think I talked about it on here, but I enjoyed that too. And for all my talk on this podcast recently about, like, I don't miss live music, I mean, I still don't. It was nice to hear, but I don't find myself, like, it wasn't activating something in my core that was like, I need more of this. But I was like, oh, this is perfectly pleasant. I was happy that only one of the bands had a drummer. Um, because my hearing is very bad and I didn't want to be around super loud music. But the band who did have the drummer, I don't know what they're called. I got to figure this out. But they were a loud southern country rock band. And they played a lot of covers and some originals. And I got to look at the schedule to see what they were called. I didn't pay much attention to the bands that were coming in and like who was on the schedule. I was just kind of like, I specifically didn't want to know. I was like, I just want to be surprised by all this music. And the country rock band, though, was interesting because there was this guitar player in the band that, like, I just kept looking at him and I was like, this guy looks familiar. And he was just like the perfect dirtbag look. Just his jeans and his motorcycle boots and his wallet chain, his dirty t-shirt, and his face was dirty and his hair was greasy and he had a trucker cap and was playing a really low-slung Gibson Les Paul, sunburst, and was fucking ripping and had really good tone. And I was like, this guy's great. Like, everything about this guy is great. And everyone in the band kind of looked good, but he looked like, I was like, this guy's cool. And then the next afternoon he came in and I was serving him some beers and we were chatting and he told me his name was Marty and I was like, where do you live? And he told me the name of the town. He's like, have you heard of it? I was like, no. And he's like, not surprising. It's a little north of Twin, which I suppose he meant Twin Falls, Idaho. And he's like, it's population 19. And I was like, how you doing? He was like, I'm doing all right, but I ran out of drugs. And he gave me a chuckle. And I was like, oh, yeah, man, I feel you. Yeah, me too, didn't tell him I ran out of drugs years ago. But he was like, man, I could really use some Adderall. And I was like, yeah, I understand. It was like, I don't know, 11 a.m. and he was already drinking beer again. And then the next day he came in, the next morning at like 9 a.m. to drink more beer with a couple of other guys from his band. And for some reason, I had put up a sign in the bar the other night. I was making signs for drink specials. We had all these drinks that we needed to move. We had Lorin wanted to get rid of all the Sierra Nevada Torpedo IPA because she had ordered too much, and she had gotten an order of too many Jack and Coke bottles, so she wanted to get rid of those and wanted to get rid of Twisted Tea. So I just made signs that said, Harmonica Fest Special, Twisted Tea, Harpoon, Jack and Coke, or Torpedo for $4, which is the regular price. And we ended up completely selling out of the IPAs. We have another IPA it's the McCalm Brewing Company IPA, and people like that one, so they were ordering that, and I just told them we were out of it. And then people kept ordering the Jack and Cokes, and the Twisted Tea I was doing 3 for $10, and $4 or 3 for $10, and we sold a bunch of those. But Lorin was mad at me because she was like, just sell them for $3, and I was like, I'm not gonna sell them for $3. I'm gonna sell them for $4. I'm gonna tell people it's a special, and they're gonna believe it, and it fucking worked. It's amazing the psychology of like people kept saying, I want the special. I'll have the Jack and Coke special. And I'm like, it's not a special at all. It's just a sign. But then when I was making those signs, I made another sign that said Dead Jail or Rock and Roll with brown marker on a big white piece of paper. And I hung it from one of the rafters in the bar just to amuse myself. And Dead Jail or Rock and Roll is a phrase I love, but it's also a song by Michael Monroe from Hanoi Rocks. A guy whose music I've loved for a long time, and I ended up becoming his manager for about a year in 2017. We went to Japan together, which was awesome. But that next morning, Sunday morning, Marty was back and with his two friends, and we're just shooting the shit, and I was serving them beers between taking orders for breakfast sandwiches, and a surprising amount of people were drinking beer on Sunday morning after the festival. But at one point, he pointed up at the sign, and he's like, did you put that sign up? And I was like, yeah. And then one of his friends is like, that's him. And I was like, what? He's like, that's Metal Marty. And I was like, oh. But it took me a minute, and I was like, that's him? What? And then he's like, that's Metal Marty. And I'm like, you're in the Super Suckers. And he was like, yeah. And I was like, oh. And it all came together. And the Super Suckers covered the song Dead Jail or Rock and Roll by Michael Monroe. And so they assumed that I put it up because I knew who he was, and I knew that that was a Super Suckers song, even though it's a cover. But I didn't know it all, but I guess somewhere in my subconscious I knew. And so that was pretty funny. And I wanted to be like, dude, I know you. And we've worked together a bunch, and I've done a bunch of shows with you, but I didn't because I still don't want to blow my cover up there. So I just didn't say anything. I was just like, "Oh, cool, yeah, I've seen you guys play," and he was like, "Yeah, right," and it was like happy to be recognized. But I was like, "What are the chances? Like, what are the chances that guy lives in fuck off Idaho, in a town of 19 people? That's even less than the town of Yellow Pine." But I got to tell you, if he's near Twin Falls, that means he's also near Boise, and he's not. It might be a small town, but it's not going to be nearly as backcountry, obviously, as Yellow Pine is. But I was like, what are the chances that I'm gonna run into Metal Marty from the Super Suckers? And I did, and so that was a funny little coincidence, I guess. And ran into a couple other guys I know. Guy from down here who plays in a band called Jug Handle Parade. Ran into him, gave him a hug. That was cool. And then this guy I've been getting to know up here named Darren, who works at the McCall Sports Exchange, who I met at the laundromat and had a long conversation with, because there was just the two of us in a laundromat one Monday while I was trying to upload my podcast, and we chatted a lot. And then I've run into him in town a couple more times, and he kept saying like, "Oh, one of these days I want to ride my bicycle up to Yellow Pine," and I was like, "That's 52 miles." He's like, "I know, I like riding my bike over Lick Creek," and that's a lot of elevation gain. It's 2,000 feet in elevation gain on a fucking gnarly dirt road. But he said he was going to mountain bike it. But he ended up showing up at the bar, and that was cool. And it felt cool to see people I knew, and it felt cool to see, like, young people in the town. And there was a fair amount of, like, yeah, young... most of the people who come to the town are like guys my age on like motorcycle trips, because we're a stop on the BDR backcountry discovery route, so we get a lot of motorcyclists coming through, and we just get a lot of like dudes in their 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s who are up there camping, fishing, doing that kind of thing. And like we get a lot of couples who come up from Boise or wherever who are just like, "Oh, we just wanted to take a drive up to Yellow Pine." But we don't get many like what I would call kids, people in their 20s, early 30s, groups like that. So it was good to see a lot of them up there, and obviously there was a fair amount of like babes, which was cool to see in town, and like groups of girls who were there together without boyfriends. That just adds a different vibe to the whole energy of the bar, when there's like single women, or at least single looking, like not surrounded by other dudes. But of course they quickly became surrounded by other dudes. But it's just cool to have that whole energy going on, and I just fucking phenomenal amount of interesting customer interactions, which I've been having a hard time remembering a lot of, and a lot of them are probably fucking hilarious to me in the moment, and the things that come out of my mouth and the things I get to say to people up there. And I think that the liberty that being the guy behind the bar, the liberty that gives you to say shit that you might not say to someone otherwise, is fucking great, and I definitely feed off that. But one of my favorite customer of the weekend, I think, who was a bit of a drunken jackass, was this guy who came in. He came in one day, and I was serving him, and big dude, like 6'4", 6'5", 300 pounds, just big fucking corn-fed motherfucker, maybe elk-fed. But he'd come in one day, and he was pretty drunk, and then he came in the next afternoon, and he was pretty drunk, and he like ordered a bunch of drinks, and he was the kind of guy who was like, get something for him, and him. And I'm like, okay. So I got everyone their drinks, and his first time he asked me to run his credit card, it was like $30-something. And then he tipped me $50. And I was like, I like this. And then he was like, "I'm 100% tipper. I tip 100%. And I was like, okay, well, now I like you less, because you're pointing out that you're such a good tipper. And I wanted to say, well, you tip more than 100%. But I was like, whatever, cool, $50 tip at like 2 p.m. This is great. And he bought a few more things, and then he bought a t-shirt. I had made these t-shirts that said "Suck and Blow in Idaho," and designed by the incomparable Aaron Lazar, singer from the Giraffes and Don't. And I had made this shirt. It says "Suck and Blow in Idaho," and a picture of a harmonica, and it says Yellow Pine Harmonica Fest. And Loren, the owner, was a little like, that's a little edgy. There's families that are going to be here. And I was like, yeah, I know, but like, that's how you play the harmonica. You suck and blow on it. And she was like, okay, yeah. Turn away from the sun a little here. If you're wondering why I'm turning away from the sun, it's because it's shining on my hat and making a reflection. And A lot of people watch this podcast on YouTube. So if you're listening to this podcast and you want to watch it and look at my pretty face and my lovely locks, so you can do that. Just go on YouTube, search Tuesdays with Jakey. But she was like, I don't know. And I was like, well, yeah, that's how you play a harmonica, though. And she was like, yeah, well, you got a point. So go ahead and make the shirts that say Suck and Blow in Idaho. So I did. And dude bought one of those. I'm going to show them to you here. Yeah. I'd pitch them to sell them to you and say you need to buy one, but we don't have any because we sold all of them. And I was really worried that I was making too many. I made 144. And I was like, that is certainly too many of these shirts. And I actually had a little bit of heart palpitations one night in bed. And I was like, I'm going to be stuck with all these t-shirts. Why'd I order so many? But they had already been printed, so there was no turning back at that point. And so I just went with it, and it turned out they were huge hits, and dudes were buying them, old people were buying them for their kids, and it was just so funny all weekend to, like, sometimes I'd walk out into the street and check out what was going on, and it's just these random, like, hillbillies walking around with these t-shirts. It really made me smile. But I had cut the sleeves and collar off mine because it was really hot in the bar, and I wanted it to look cool, too, but it was hot, and I was wearing it, and this dude was like... He had already tipped me $50, and then he was like, another round of drinks and a shirt, and he was like, I want the sleeves cut off of mine. I was like, I'll give you scissors. And he was like, I want you to cut the sleeves off of mine. I was like, all right, that's going to be an extra $10, though. And he was like, no problem. So I was like, okay. So I made $10 for cutting his sleeves off. And then he ordered a few more drinks, and then he said at one point, there was a woman in there, a solo acoustic woman, who was good. She was a solo acoustic on the banjo, and hitting like a bass drum pedal into her suitcase for a little thud, a little percussion. And she started playing Jolene. And the dude was like, you know who wrote this song? And from his tone of voice, I was like, I think you don't. But I was like, yeah, Dolly Parton. He's like, nope, it was Chris Christopherson. I was like, yeah, it wasn't Chris Christopherson. It was Dolly Parton. He was like, you're wrong. It was Chris Christopherson. I'm like, dude, Dolly Parton wrote Jolene. And he's like, no, she didn't. That's what people think. And I was like, and like, usually I'll just like let people be wrong. Because who cares, right? I'm just trying to get money out of them. That's my job as a bartender, is like make them feel special and important. And like I like them, whether I do or not. A lot of times I do, or at least I can find something to like about them. But I was not. People can say the wrong thing about anything. Obviously, I hear people saying the wrong thing about vaccinations and shit up there. But you're not going to say the wrong thing about Dolly Parton, not in front of me. That's fucking right. And I was like, yo, man, you're wrong. And I'm like, she wrote Jolene and I Will Always Love You, both songs on the same day. It's one of the most famous stories about songwriting that's ever existed. And so you're just wrong. And he's like, I'm not wrong. How much you want to bet? And I was like, okay, name your price. And he was like, $100. And I was like, okay. And we shook on it. And he was like, wait, do you even have $100? And I was like, well, you just tipped me $80 and paid me $10 to cut the sleeves off your shirt. So I have at least $90. But yeah, I have $100. Do you have $100? And he was like, fuck yeah, I do. And I was like, all right, cool. Look it up. Fucking pull out your phone and look it up. And he's like, I don't have my phone with me. And I was like, okay, who's got a phone? Who's got a phone? And in that moment, though, when I shook on it and it was a $100 bet, the gambler anxiety came back to me. And I've talked about this. I'm pretty sure I talked about this at length on the podcast. I did back in April when I was in Las Vegas. I talked about how I used to be like a semi-pro poker player for a couple of years in Vegas, and how when I stopped playing poker, I stopped gambling entirely. I don't gamble. I don't play blackjack. When I go to Las Vegas, I just don't gamble. And I just didn't like that when I was doing it regularly and solely as a source of making money. There was a real, like, there was a calm to it. I didn't get antsy. You probably could put a heart rate monitor on me, and no matter how much money was in the pot, I was fine. Because it was just what I was doing all the time. But when I stopped playing poker, I stopped gambling in general. And then, because the reason of that is I learned that, like, if you make $100, you might feel this good about making it. But with me anyway, when I lose $100, I feel this bad. And I was like, that's just not going to work. That's not a workable, tenable situation to put myself in. So I just stopped gambling, and it's never bothered me. But a few years back, I was playing in a charity poker tournament in London, and I was part of some music business conference, and it was only for charity. We all put in £100, and the winner was going to get some like trophy or something, and the £1,000, or 10 people. No, there were 30 people, 3 tables, but 10 people per table. And I got so fucking anxious every time I was in a hand. And then after like an hour, I had been in a few hands, I just like pre-flop, looked at my cards, had a shitty hand, pushed all in, someone called, and I was just so happy to be out of that tournament. And like, of course, I lost the hand, and I haven't gambled really at all since then. I think a couple times I played a little blackjack when I was in Vegas the second to last time, just because I was in a very despondent state and I didn't know what I was doing. But I played roulette one time since then and put $20 down. I was with a friend who had never seen a roulette table, and she wanted to know how it worked, and I was like, this is how it works, watch. And I put $20 on 23, Michael Jordan's number, and it hit. So I got $360 back, and I was just crying laughing, because I was like, that's the odds of that are what, 38 to 1. And so but that's the only time I'd gambled. So like, as soon as that bet was made, but before he Googled it, I knew I was right. 100%. I knew I was right. And yet still, my heart went up in my throat. And it wasn't really about I might lose $100. It was just about the idea of gambling. It felt really weird. And it felt really weird because I knew I was fucking right. And like, you can know you have the best hand at poker, but it's not very often where you know you have the best hand. You know what I mean? Like, to know you have the best hand, there's got to be 2 aces on the board, and you're holding 2, and then nobody's going to be able to beat you. But otherwise, like, yeah, there's very few instances where you know. So, but even when you're pretty fucking sure you have the best hand, you still get pretty antsy. But I fucking knew. I knew. I was like, Dolly Parton wrote Jolene. Chris Christopherson had nothing to do with it. And then finally, this kid Ryan walked in that I know, whose family has a house up there. And he walked in, and he was like, hey, Jake. And it's a very flamboyant gay dude. And he was like, hey, Jake. And I was like, Ryan, pull out your phone and Google who wrote Jolene. And he goes, yeah, it was Dolly Parton. And I was like, yeah, but pull out your phone and Google it. And he was like, it was Dolly Parton. And I was like, I know, but like, I just bet this guy $100 that it was Dolly Parton, and he doesn't believe me. He thinks it was Chris Christopherson. So pull out your fucking phone and Google it. And he was like, I don't need to Google it, Jake. It was Dolly Parton. I was like, Ryan, I know. And he didn't know what he walked into. And I'm getting frustrated because I like wanted someone to Google it right away. And I was like, I just wanted to like end this fucking nervousness I had in my chest, because I just wanted to make sure I had the right answer, even though I knew I had the right answer. It was a very bizarre feeling. And while he was like, okay. And he pulled his phone out and he showed it to the dude, and the dude was like, that's wrong. Google more. No, it wasn't. And I was like, dude, I know what you're thinking of. You're thinking of Me and Bobby McGee, that was written by Chris Christopherson, but was popularized by Janis Joplin, another female singer. But fucking Dolly Parton wrote Jolene. And he was like, then his heart sank, and he went, oh, fuck. You're right. Fuck. And then it was a whole fucking struggle to get paid, because I was like, give me $100. And he's like, put it on my tab. And I'm like, this has nothing to do with your tab. I'm not putting your fucking gambling loss on the bar's credit card. Like, so they can pay taxes on it? Yeah, no fucking way. And he was like, oh, I don't have cash. And I'm like, you just fucking asked me if I had cash. And by this point, I was mad at the guy. And he had also told me I was fat earlier. And he was very fat. And I'm very sensitive about my weight. Oddly enough. And I'm very sensitive about my weight, but I'm also very proud at how well I've been managing my weight lately, especially even with this knee injury and not being able to exercise. I've been fucking eating very well. And he was making fun of me for eating a salad like an hour earlier. And I was like, I can kind of take it from him, because he's tipping me a lot of money. But I was getting a little annoyed with him then too. And yeah, he had gotten annoyed. He had been like, what are you eating? You're eating a salad? How many salads do you eat a day? And I was like, what? What are you talking about? And he's like, you're a pretty big dude. you must eat a lot of salads to maintain a figure like that. And I'm like, yeah, well, I also eat a lot of cheeseburgers. If I ate nothing but cheeseburgers, I'd be your size, you know, but it pissed me off. And then, so I lost all my patience with him at that point. I was like, just give me the fucking money. Go across the street to the ATM and get the money. And then he was like, no, I'll go to the ATM. I was like, fine, I'm going to run your credit card right now. We're going to do it as cash back because we're allowed to do that at the tavern. But I never do it because it's a pain in the ass. And like, you got to we're supposed to calculate 3% on top for the credit card fee if we're doing cash back for someone. And I'm like, this isn't fucking Target, bro. Like, you can't just push a button that says you want cash back. Like, we're not an ATM store. So, but anyway, I was like, all right, fine. I'm going to do it. Because I was like, at this point, I'm like, I don't even want him to go across the street and fucking get the $100 out of the ATM because I don't want to risk him not coming back and me not getting my money. So I was like, fine, I'll run it on your credit card, but I got to add $6. And he's like, for what? And I was like, that's our cashback fee. That's our ATM fee. I was like, and he's like, no, you eat the $6. So like, he wasn't making any sense. And he was like, you ring 94 then. And I was like, what? Anyway, because he was fucking hammered by this point. And so I ended up charging his card for $106, put the note in the register saying $100 cash back, and I put the $100 in my fucking pocket. And I was stoked. And at that point, he still had a tab open for 4 more beers, and that I was going to run separately. And then I basically ran him out of the bar by shaming him. And like, as more people came in, I was like, I just want $100 off this idiot. And eventually he like walked outside to quote unquote get something to eat. We never saw him again, and he left his tab open. So I ended up closing it out the next day and didn't put a tip on it. Usually if someone's going to leave their credit card, I'm going to put a 25% tip on it at the end of the night. But for him, I was just like, fuck it. Like, I already got enough money off of this guy. So that was probably my favorite interaction over the weekend because I made so much money so quickly. But yeah, there was a lot of other good ones. But yeah, I don't know if I need to bore you with all of that. Just like lots of witty quips. I like that I've been sharpening my wit and my banter. And yeah, I had a good time up there. Let's see what else happened. There was Gerald, a fucking scumbag. That's not even worth getting into. But I basically told him he wasn't welcome at the bar. He's a long time semi-resident of Yellow Pine. But he came in and I was like, I don't like the looks of this dude at all. Like, you can just tell sometimes when someone's just a fucking dick. And I was like, this guy's a fucking dick. But I was trying to be nice to him, and he seemed to know a bunch of people. And then he was creeping on this younger girl who was a daughter of a couple up there that I really love. And that did not sit well with me. And then I'm pretty sure I had my bar tabs written down, and they were on the surface of the bar, which you're never supposed to do, but I had come in to take over my shift right as Gerald showed up, and the woman who was working before me in the morning shift, she had left all the bar tabs at the end of the bar, so I just put his up there because I didn't want to change the system over from her to me yet. But so they were up there for a little while, and then he was sitting down near the end of the bar, and then he went outside and was drinking out there, and then at a certain point I went and gathered the tabs and went to put them in the place I usually put them. 'Cause tons of people drink on a tab there. They don't even put their credit card down. You just keep track of what they're drinking or spending, and then they pay it, usually once a week, sometimes once a month. It's just the way it works. Basically, half the town runs on like just Loren's credit. But I noticed Gerald's fucking tab sheet was missing, and I was like, that motherfucker. And he had put like fucking 15 beers on it by that point and buying drinks for everybody. And I was like, he took that sheet thinking that I wouldn't notice, and then he would get away without paying his tab. But of course I fucking noticed. Then he came back in a little while later and was like cheating a guy in a dice game. Some like just yokel from Boise had come up, and Gerald was like, I was kind of half paying attention, and he was like kind of telling the guys the rule of this dice game and kept winning free beers. But I was like, he's cheating. He keeps changing the rules to benefit him based on what he's rolling. And that pissed me off. And why am I getting angry even remembering it? But eventually I told Lorin, I was like, I'm going to throw this guy out of the bar before the weekend's over. And then he came in, he ended up settling that tab, and because I just recreated it from memory and added 2 more beers on. And I was like, if he was going to call me on it, I was going to call him on having snaked the tab off the bar. But he didn't. He paid me and actually left a 15% tip. And I was like, huh. And then the next day he came in and was like, write it down. And I was like, yeah. He came in later that night. And I was like, I don't start tabs after 10 p.m. And he was like, since when? And I was like, since right now. Then the next day he came in and was like, write it down. Give me a Budweiser. Write it down. And I was like, he said the day before, he said something along the lines of like, I'm getting the feeling you don't like me much. And I was like, you hit the nail right on the fucking head, Gerald. And he was like, that's all right. Lorin don't like me much neither. Oh, that was it. Then he said to the guy who was cheating in the dice game, because I went to the bathroom and I came back and he was like, where you been? I want another beer. And I was like, I was in the bathroom. And he's like, there was a time where I would just walk back there and grab whatever I wanted from behind the bar. And I was like, you fucking step behind this bar, it's going to be the last thing you ever do inside of here. And that's when he was like, I get the feeling you don't like me much. And I was like, yeah, exactly. And the next day he came in and was like, give me 2 Budweisers, Keystone Light or whatever. And he's like, write it down. I was like, I'm not starting a tab for you today. And he's like, why not? I was like, it's just too much to keep track of. I don't want to worry about it. I'm not doing tabs for anybody. And he's like, what are all those? And he pointed at my tabs that were sitting on the bar behind me. And I was like, oh, those are tabs for people I trust. And that's when he pretty much got the message that I didn't want to have anything to do with him. And he only came into the bar 1 more time over the whole weekend. So that was great. But I think it's somewhat empowering, I guess, to be behind the bar. But you also, at a place like that, you got to fucking let people know who's in charge right away. I guess it's like an alpha thing, but it's like, you're the only bartender. There's no security guard. There's no fucking police. I heard someone saying over the weekend, which is very true, but I hadn't really considered it, that like, you call the police in a town like this, it takes them 3 hours to get here from Cascade. It's like, oh yeah, right. Like, it's just, there's no law. There's no sheriff stationed in our town. So the law is, I guess, the bartender. It's also that everybody's carrying a gun. But I did say to Candy and Willie at some point, I'm like, what's up with that guy Gerald? And they're like, oh, he's bad news, and he's known to be a thief. And I was like, got it, right, like, I know. But a fair amount of other good interactions, and just all sorts of fucking fun. I just had a good time, and I worked, most days I worked 12 noon to 2 a.m., one day 2 p.m., and one day 8 a.m. to 2 a.m. And it was fucking exhausting. And I ended up having some help. This guy Clint came in and bartended, and I was not stoked about there being other bartenders. And there was talk about having an outdoor bar, but then it ended up raining on Friday. And so Lorin didn't want to set up the outdoor bar because it rained for part of the day, and there just weren't as many people around as we were expecting. And eventually, so I ended up just working inside the whole weekend. And then I was like, I don't want help because I don't want to split my tips. Like, I'm here to fucking make money. And I knew it would be weird to be behind a bar with another person because I've never done that before. Obviously, I've never bartended before, and it's always been just me bartending at this bar. But also, like, the bar's not really laid out for 2 bartenders. There's only 1 cash register. The beer's all in one place. Like, there's just not a lot of room back there to move around. But I kind of I had to accept it. And I was like, you know what? I'm new in this town. This guy wants to work. And Lorin told me, she was like, look, he wanted to work. He asked me to work months ago before you even showed up on the scene. I can't really just tell him he can't work. Like, he's looking forward to making this money too. And I was like, you know what? I'm just going to accept it. And I did. And I made the most of it. And he turned out to be great to work with. And then we had Ann and Sue Holloway were working as like waitresses, and turned out to be great because, in all honesty, I wouldn't have been able to handle it myself. I mean, I would have, but I would have been completely stressed. But at a certain point, I was like, my knee's still bothering me a bit. And I was like, I had it all taped up and bandaged and a brace on it. And I was like, at a certain point, I was like, you know what? I'm just going to sit down here. And like, Clint took up his position in front of the like coolers that are in front of you, the floor standing coolers. And I was like, all right, this guy's going to work and take half the tips. Cool. I'm going to let him work. And I worked pretty hard Friday and Saturday, but not nearly as hard as I could have. And I just kept like yelling down to the bar, hey, I need 2 Coors Lights. I need this. I need that. So we weren't like nuts to butts bumping into each other. And I was like, in the end, I fucking loved it because I was like, it was part teamwork and part. I think I was happy with my own ingenuity in figuring out that like, I can like lean on him, right, as a real partner and like not have to work as hard. So that was great. Um, and then I ended up working the Sunday morning breakfast shift, which Lauren had been telling me she's like, we're not serving Sunday breakfast. We're closing. We're all gonna be exhausted. And then at some point Saturday night, she said to me, and by Saturday night I had just fucking had it. I was just so spent, and I was drinking coffee at 11 p.m. just trying to get through it and amp myself up, and drinking Mountain Dew and eating corn chips. And certain point Saturday night, she was like, "Hey, so we're gonna open for breakfast tomorrow. Do you want to work?" And I was like, "What? No. Wait, why are we open?" And she's like, "We weren't going to open for breakfast because the town was doing a community hall breakfast for $6. And I guess they had fucked it up really bad on Friday and Saturday. And Lauren was like, everyone's complaining about the town's community hall breakfast, so I want to make sure people have something good to eat before they hit the road and get out of here." And that's kind of the woman she is, and it's very admirable. But I was like, I don't want to work this. But I was like, I'm not going to let her work it alone while I sleep upstairs. And yeah, meanwhile, I slept upstairs in the bar every night last week, which is fine, but I'm not going to keep doing it. But I got to tell you, Thursday night, I'll get to that in a minute. But yeah, it's very noble of her. But I certainly, I didn't want to come downstairs. We had closed the bar at exactly 2 a.m. on Saturday night. And then I got upstairs and into bed around 3 a.m. and fell asleep almost immediately. But then the alarm was going off at 7, and I was, oh, fuck. Oh, my God. I need sleep. But I went downstairs, and before I knew it, it was 11:30, and we were going to close at 11, and then we were going to close at noon, but people kept coming in. And finally at 1, I was like, Lauren, can we close now? And the other bar in town had opened for lunch at 1, so I was like, that's just fucking fine. Like you guys go eat somewhere else, like by that point, another 5 hours. I was like just spent. But yeah, credit to Lauren. Like she's, single-handedly, like she's kind of the saint of Yellow Pine, in that she keeps that place open and has kept it open for years just because the other place opens and closes and they don't keep regular hours. They were open for all of Harmonica Fest, obviously, because it's a huge weekend. But oftentimes she doesn't feel like working or being open or staying open late. But she's also like, well, if someone comes into this town and they end up here, like, they need to be able to get something to eat. So I have to feed them. Very grandmotherly, I guess, and very saintly. So it was cool, obviously cool to be a part of that. And like I've talked about before, to be in service to the community. So I can get behind that. And, but Thursday night. So Thursday night we closed around 2 a.m., maybe 1:30. And, the Harmonica Fest was really Friday, Saturday. Thursday was like the pre-party day, even though it was busy all day. We had bands in the bar from noon. We had one band that played. They played 8 p.m. till 1 a.m. Wednesday, and then we had music all day Friday. But the main stage didn't start till 5:30 on Thursday. So really, Friday, Saturday were the big days. But Thursday night, man, it started raining. Maybe at like 1 a.m., I got upstairs, and there's the 2 windows on the room upstairs where I was sleeping, and this like ratty old bed. The windows don't have curtains on them, and all of a sudden, like, I felt like I was in like a haunted house or a discotheque, and there were strobe lights going on. It lasted almost an hour, just crazy lightning storms, and not thunder and not rain, just lightning storms. And I was like, oh, this is not good, because I've learned from being up there. I didn't know this before, but like the way most forest fires start is from lightning. So lightning will hit a tree, it'll smolder for a while, turn into flame, turn into fire, and the fires start small, and then by the time they get big enough for the Forest Service to even notice, they're kind of starting to rage out of control, and that's how it happens. And I guess it's been happening that way for millions of years, right? And they burn for a while, and then they get put out by rain or naturally or winds or, God knows what. Forest Service and firefighters are just trying to fuck with nature and, I guess, preserve towns and structures. And there's a lot of talk up there of the Forest the people get mad at the Forest Service and the firefighters for just like letting it burn. But at a certain point, like, what the fuck are you going to do? You can't stop the elements, right? But so there was all this lightning going on, and then at a certain point, so I'm up in like basically the attic of the bar sleeping, and it's got a big tin roof, and then I started hearing the rain coming, and then I don't know what the fuck was going on, but it felt like there were reindeer dancing on the roof for like 20 or 30 minutes, and I was trying to go to sleep, and it was just bang, 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 bang. And it turned out it was a crazy hailstorm, and if you want to see the hail, go to Yellow Pine, Idaho on Instagram, and you can see this guy Adam up there who runs the Instagram account had taken a bunch of video of the storm. You want to see a crazy lightning storm, you can see that. And then he had video of the hail and some pictures the next morning. Like, I went outside the next morning, and under some of the vendor tents, there were still these piles of hail that were like literally marble-sized hail. And it felt like the roof was going to cave in, and I was nervous that it was for a little while. But it didn't, obviously. And then I thought to myself, while I was trying to sleep, and I'm like, maybe the roof's going to give. I literally thought maybe it was going to give, but then I thought to myself, this place has been here since 1939, and if it hasn't given out yet, it's probably not going to give out tonight. So I'm just going to go back to sleep. And I finally fell asleep. And yeah, I woke up the next day, and I was just like feeling for everyone who had gotten up there on Thursday and was camping and sleeping in tents. Like, man, I talked to a bunch of people the next day, and I was like, were you camping? And they're like, yeah. And nobody told me that hail had ripped through their tent, but it had ripped through a couple of the vendor tents, those tall tents that you see at like music festivals that vendors have. So they're like, 7 feet tall, 4 posts, and like, 8 feet by 8 feet or whatever. And a couple of those had gotten ripped through by the hail. So I'm sure a lot of people who were sleeping out and camping all over the place ended up having a fucking miserable experience from the hail. But yeah, I was so glad to be sleeping inside the bar during that. And I guess that's my Yellow Pine Tavern experience. Yellow Pine Harmonica Fest experience. We did end up selling every last harmonica suck and blow t-shirt. I guess we sold every last one except 3. Because I gave one to Lorin and I took 2. When I sold the very last one, I was like, oh, fuck, the only one I have, I cut the sleeves and collar off of, and I wanted a regular one. And then when I finally got back up into my little nook that night, actually the next day, Sunday, when I was packing all my shit to leave, I picked something up, and under it was a fully intact suck and blow shirt that I must have, I guess at some point, I don't even remember doing this, but at some point I must have grabbed it and been like, I don't want to go without one of these shirts. So yeah, now I have a full one, and I'm stoked. And will I make more? Maybe. Maybe I'll put some up in rocksoftthreads.threadless.com. Or maybe not. Maybe you just had to be there. But I mean, we only have the world famous Yellow Pine Tavern t-shirts. We sold out all of those except medium and double extra large. So that was great. And, oh man, I'm yawning. Sorry. I'm fucking tired. I ended up having to go to Boise yesterday, too. I got home Sunday, fucking exhausted, and my phone died somewhere along the weekend. It stopped accepting a charge. First, the screen went all wonky because I got it a little wet while I was showering, and it wouldn't respond to my touches, and then I fucking soaked it in rice overnight, and then the screen was working fine, but then it wouldn't charge, and then I brought it to the Apple store, and it charged fine for them in Boise, so I rode all the way home Sunday evening. We finished work at 2. I didn't leave the tavern until 3, then I went and saw my friends Ann and Jeff, finally left Yellow Pine at 3:30. It took me more than 2.5 hours to get home, when usually it takes less than 2 hours, but I was just riding so slow on Lick Creek, and just I was so shattered and tired that I was like, you can't ride fast. I would have felt like I was putting myself in danger. But then I had to fucking set my alarm for 6 and leave the house at 7 so I could get to Boise for my 9:30 therapy appointment and then my 10:20 Genius Bar Apple appointment. Try to get my phone fixed, but it's out of Apple Care, and then I was going to buy a new one, and the guy was having a hard time getting the Verizon system to fucking connect, and then finally I was like, hey, the new one's gonna come out next month or whatever, so I don't want to be locked into this fucking phone for 24 months of payments, and I certainly, like, I don't have the money really to, like, buy a brand new phone outright. So turns out that there's something wrong with the charging port, but it can charge if you have a USB-C to Lightning with a 20-watt adapter plug. So I'm like, fine, I don't care. I'll just have to use this specific plug and cable that I paid like fucking $50, $60 for, or whatever, $57 for. And I'm like, ugh. I did make good money with the shirts and tips, but I'm still like in that poverty mindset of like not wanting to spend anything. And I even, like, after I went to the Apple store, I went to REI yesterday, and I was like, I'm going to treat myself to something. And there's this nice, lightweight, super comfy camping chair that I love having, a camping chair that's like where I can sit upright. I have this Coleman one that weighs like 9 pounds. This other one only weighed 3 pounds and was a lot more compact. This Coleman one, I look like the Beverly Hillbillies when I ride down the street on my motorcycle, because I do have bags strapped to it and the chair with the legs sticking out strapped to it. But I was like, I can't buy this because I'm just in poverty mode. And I'm like, I have a little money right now because I've been hustling, but I'm afraid to spend it because I don't know what's going to come next. And obviously shows, like, we just canceled our show with Mike Farris because of the fucking vaccination requirements. And a Frank Turner show got pulled, not because of vaccination, but because of the Counting Crows not being able to sell out their second show. But then I just saw Counting Crows canceled a bunch of shows. I don't think the fall's going to be good. I think it was also funny that the only two new shows that I booked this year that weren't rescheduled from on the books last year have both ended up being canceled now. And that kind of tells me, like, just it's too soon to do concerts. And that's one of the things I was thinking of the other day when I was seeing all these tours get canceled, is that, like, back last fall when we were all saying this is about to be over and people started planning all their shows again for summer 2021, I just remember all the epidemiologists were like, touring should not resume until 2022 at the earliest, and everyone was like, that far away? But the epidemiologists were like, the virus is going to mutate and it's going to come back and there's going to be a whole nother wave in the fall of 2021. And back in 2020 we were like, what? These guys are crazy. But, like, even the smart people of us don't trust science. Like, we feel like these guys are saying the sky is falling. But that's just in general, right? People are saying the sky is literally falling with the ozone layer and climate change, and now there's all these crazy fires and extreme weather events, and, like, no one wants to believe that we're fucked, but we're kind of fucked. Between climate change, between this pandemic, like, a lot more shows are going to be getting canceled. I have 2 shows this week. I have the Dirty Rebirth Brass Band Wednesday night and Murphy's Law Thursday. And I find it interesting. Sancho has been getting a lot of emails. People from the Rebirth camp, the customers for Rebirth Brass Band, want to know what our COVID protocols are and if we're going to require people to wear a mask. And I can tell from the tones of the messages that they want me to tell them that there's gonna be restrictions in place. And what I'm writing back to them is we're suggesting everybody wear a mask, because the new mandate laws for New York don't start till August 16th, so both of these shows are before that. The Rebirth people want to be assured that it's going to be safe to be on the boat, but guess what? It's probably not. But it's legal, so I'm gonna let them on. And the Murphy's Law customers, they're writing to me just saying straight up, like, I want to come to this show, but I want to make sure that there's no vaccination or mask mandate before I come. And I'm like, yeah, there's not. Cool. Like, this is probably going to be a super spreader event, but I'm allowed to do it, right? So I'm doing it, and I don't feel good about it, but I also, I gotta say, if I was there in New York, I'd like to say I wouldn't be at that show, but I would be probably, because it's Jimmy's birthday, and I would be there, and I'd probably stand outside on the deck the whole time, in the private part of the deck up by the pilot house. But I just put myself in what is probably also going to be some sort of super spreader event all weekend, so who knows? I'll keep you guys updated, obviously, on the podcast if how my test results go. I think I'm going to get tested today. I am going to get tested today. I think I'm going to get tested again on Thursday. Just because you read about it takes a while to develop a positive. And I may have put myself in the middle of harm's way this weekend, but I don't want to put anyone else in it. Like, everyone that was up there this weekend was there on their own free will. But if I do end up test positive, I'm not going to go back up there knowing I'm positive. And I'm not going to go back up there not knowing one way or the other. So I just got to find out, and whatever I might be responsible for by putting on those 2 shows this week, like, I don't know, man. Like, that's why we have governments, right? Is to make laws that protect its citizens, and our government's completely failed us when it's come to COVID. Could have just paid everybody to stay home for 8 weeks last fucking April, and we'd probably be in a much better place right now, but nope. But instead, they just extended all these fucking unemployment benefits, and it's like, just kept trying to fucking plug a hole in a dam with 1 grain of sand at a time. So, there's another thing that I've been thinking about this weekend, and really for a while now, and that's like, this past weekend is when I realized, like, I'm a fucking great bartender. I'm really good at it. I'm really good at, like, people have been telling me that, but I really understood it this week. And I understood that, like, more people told me, and, like, Willie told me last week, and a few more people told me this week that, like, more of the townspeople come to the tavern now and drink for longer because you work there and they like hanging out with you. They like the music you play. They like the way you treat them. You just create a fun atmosphere. And I'm like, right. Fuck. All right. I am a great bartender. Am I great at mixing drinks? No, obviously. Like, will I ever be? No, I'm not. So will I go work in a real bar someday? Maybe. So that's what I've been thinking about. Like, when this little adventure in a Yellow Pine ends in the winter, like after Labor Day, I'm going to see how it goes. Like, I don't know that I can really work there in the winter. I bet I could stay there in the winter, and I like the idea of that, but I'm also like, with this poverty mindset, I'm like, I got to make money. Because I don't know what's going to happen next year with the cruise season, and if I'm going to want to do it even. So I've just been starting to think, like, am I going to get a job at another bar? And if I do, it's definitely going to be a dive bar. Because I definitely have to work in a bar where I'm allowed to say whatever the fuck I want and swear at people. And just because swearing is a part of my regular vocabulary, especially in the bartender role. And, like, you want another fucking beer? What? I don't know, whatever you want to say to people. But I can't be in the kind of place where I have to, like, represent the business professionally, if that makes sense. I got to be in a place where people just come to get fucking shit-faced and have a good time. And so I was thinking, like, I guess I should check out a few of the bars in McCall and see if, like, any of them have a vibe of a place I'd want to work. But do I want to work as a bartender? Is that my future? Am I just a bartender now? Maybe. Till I figure out what's next. I can earn money that way, which is great. And the thing I love about it is that I don't have to worry about anything. Like, when I leave that bar, I'm done. I don't worry about the toilet seat's broken or the women's toilet needs the Roto-Rooter. I overhear those things, but I'm like, I'm not calling the fucking snake plumber guy to fix the toilet, nor do I want to. And I don't want to figure out what we're low on and make sure we order beers and that the ice cooler works and all that kind of fucking crap. So, one of the reasons I took the job at the Brooklyn Bowl in London was because I wanted to be part of a bigger team where my role was very defined. And where I could just shut my laptop at the end of the day and not lose sleep over how many tickets the show was selling. And it turned out that, like, I don't think I can do that in the music business. Because after running my own business for so long and just being the conscientious kind of guy I am, like, if I got a job as a talent buyer somewhere, I guess if I got a job as a talent buyer for Live Nation, I wouldn't give a fuck if it made money or not. But, like, I had this idea in my head that I wanted to become a talent buyer at One Eye Jack's in New Orleans. Last fall, I was kind of thinking of that. Because I just love that club, and I thought it would be cool to live in New Orleans. But, like, then I realized, like, I'd be there all the time. And I'd treat it like it was my own venue. And if I'm going to treat it like it's my own venue, I want to get paid like it's my own venue. But I don't really want to run a venue again. So, like, maybe bartender's a good job for a while. But also, I think I want to do something more than that, but I don't know what it is. So I guess bartender is good for now. But thinking all that stuff about my future, it's made me start to think, like, I've been talking a lot on this podcast about being in the now and just focusing on the now. And that's what I'm doing mostly. But then I've been having these, like, okay, shit, well, what's the winter going to look like? And I had a little conflict about that because I'm like, if I'm supposed to be living in the now, why am I worried about the future? But it's like, well, obviously you have to worry about the future. And then last night on my drive home from Boise, I was listening to a Sam Harris podcast, and it was an Ask Me Anything podcast, and he was answering questions from readers. And the last question of the podcast, I'm going to read now. I'm going to read the question and the answer. And that was, The question was, if the present moment is all that matters, how do we justify looking forward to things like career advancement, vacations, and personal achievements? And I transcribed Sam's answer. And he said, this strikes me as a misunderstanding of what one can reasonably expect from one's mindfulness practice. One is inevitably going to think about the past and the future and be captured by those thoughts, however much one practices in the normal case. And there's nothing wrong with finding these thoughts enjoyable, and in particular planning creatively and intelligently for a future that one will want to live in. That's actually necessary unless one is going to be a monk or a yogi living in a cave and just have one day follow the next without having to make any other contribution in the world. One has to spare one thoughts for how to get things done and what one wants to do, so one will have to have dates on the calendar and projects in various states of completion and conferences to go to and vacations to take, etc. So to be looking forward to things one is planning to do, that's a totally normal, ordinary operation of mind that can be a source of happiness. The truth is, I would also recommend that one intelligently engage that very attitude. So for instance, if you're going to take a vacation with your friends or family sometime in the next year, in my view, it makes sense to put it on the calendar early and plan for it. Think about and derive whatever pleasure you can get from looking forward to it. That strikes me as generally better than suddenly taking a vacation when it becomes mission critical to do so without taking any time to extract the pleasure from the anticipation of it. That, he went on, I transcribed more, but that whole thing is interesting to me because especially with the ideas of vacations and planning, because one of the things that's become so prevalent in people's thoughts during COVID is tons of people have been expressing on social media and to me in person, but just in general, all across social media from all different walks of life, you see a lot of people saying the best thing about COVID is not having to cancel plans. And a lot of people were talking about how plans gave them anxiety. And that's a whole different way to look at plans. And I remember once I started making some money, I did start taking vacations on a whim or being like, hey, this is coming up this weekend. I want to go there, and like just looking and finding a flight, not caring how much it costs. And then obviously when I got these buddy pass flight benefits, I started just taking off literally on a whim and just like deciding one day I was going to go to Brazil and then being there the next day, But I get it. Like, I hadn't really considered the idea of like, sure, the anxiety I get from making plans has always been from making plans with people I didn't really want to make the plans with. And that like was always that like, hey, you want to get lunch? How's next Tuesday? And you're like, sure, because next Tuesday is so far in the future, even if it was only 5 days away, that you were like, sure, no problem. Because it was like an abstract day that didn't really exist. But then I would find as those plans got closer, I started getting more anxiety and like, well, I don't want to do this. But it's been a long time since I booked a vacation far in advance. And I don't know how I'm going to feel about that moving forward. I like the idea of it. Like, maybe I'll plan a vacation. Maybe I'll call some friends and be like, hey, that's hard right now. I guess we know we'll be able to travel in the United States for the most part. But I was thinking like, hey, maybe I'll call a friend like, let's go to Asia in February. Let's go do something. Let's make a plan that we can really look forward to and like actually book the flights and be locked in and then know that we're not going to work on those days or whatever. So Sam Harris continued at the answer. In a smaller way, it's the difference between planning to have a nice dinner with friends later in the week, knowing it's on the calendar, looking forward to it, making the most of it, or suddenly finding yourself at a table with nice food, eating with people you happen to like, but there was no time spent looking forward to it. The former case is generally more enjoyable. And I would agree with him if, in fact, you're making those plans with people that you're pretty sure you're going to want to hang out with. I think one of my biggest pieces of anxiety about weddings and about this wedding I'm supposed to go to in October in general is like, the only people I know are going to be at this wedding are the bride and the groom and the minister, who I barely know. And then it's going to be my friends Phil and Chassie and Christine, who's like kind of my date to the wedding. We're just two single people going together. She's my homie. We're both very good friends with the groom. So like, yeah, why the fuck do I want to go to this wedding now? Now it's just became fucking certainly clear. Like, why don't I just go have dinner at Phil and Chassie's house and then go hang out with Christine? Like, yeah, I don't think I'm going to this wedding. Where mindfulness comes in all these other moments of life, when there's no reason to think about the future or the past, and the question is, how do you feel in the present? This was like wow to me. What are you doing with your attention now? How good do you feel now? How free of your problem are you now? And what happens when these plans you were looking forward to unravel? What happens when the vacation gets canceled, or your flight gets delayed, or the destination is not as nice as you expected? What is your mind like then? And when you find yourself reacting to something in a contracted, unhappy way, how quickly do you notice and how quickly can you recover? And what do you like to be around in these moments? When you get angry and the toxicity of your anger leaks out into the world and your family and friends have to suffer your company, how long does it take you to reset and become a tolerable human again? Or better still, how long does it take to laugh at yourself and be truly restored to a position of real psychological freedom? That's where the binary choice between being in the moment and not is worth invoking and really matters. But as for closing down any thought for the far future, that doesn't strike me as a proper function of mindfulness. In fact, I would encourage everyone to spare a thought not just for their own futures, but for a time horizon beyond that. I think it's worth some of our time and attention to make decisions in light of a future we know we will never see. How do we want the world to be after we left it? I think rather a lot depends on all of us sparing some thought for the distant future and for the world our descendants are likely to inherit, because there are certain kinds of decisions we seem very unlikely to make if we're unable to do that. And and sure, as someone without kids, for a long time I didn't care what the world looked like after I left it. But since I've decided that I wanted to live and not kill myself, I'm a lot more interested in maybe not so much how the world looks, how the world's going to look in the future, because I think it's going to look pretty bleak, to be honest. And I don't think anything I can do, recycle some aluminum cans, drive an electric car, drive less. I think it's going to take a massive shift in consciousness somehow for the world to look better. That's something I talked about briefly with a friend yesterday. So I was thinking about how, how things have changed. We were talking about smoking, right? And how it wasn't that long ago that smoking was okay. But somewhere along the lines, a massive shift occurred and smoking became doctors were smoking. You were smoking in restaurants, smoking on airplanes, smoking everywhere. And now you can't smoke anywhere. And just think about gay marriage, man. Gay people had basically no rights 10 years ago, right? It's been, certainly not 20, and look at how far everything's come that quickly. So maybe there will be a massive shift in consciousness, and maybe eventually people will just, maybe we'll get the guillotines out for the people who run the oil companies and for people like Joe Biden, who's I will not ban fracking. I saw Kamala Harris text last night, Joe Biden will never ban fracking, and that is a fact. Trying to be all yeah. But then you see a tweet from her when she was trying to become the president before she realized that nobody liked her, where she was we must ban fracking. These people are all full of shit. So they all need the guillotine at some point. But maybe they'll all get worked out of power. And now obviously the Democrats are doing everything they can to silence the progressives because they're feeling their power challenged, but it's coming, right? Hopefully there's a wave and a shift coming. And hopefully more people, as more of these old fucks, these old rich, even Democrat boomer fucks, as they start dying out, maybe their kids are going to do something with the money they get left. And maybe they're going to take the multiple houses that their parents had, and maybe they'll donate them to homeless people or try to figure out a way to change the earth for the better. Maybe. But anyway, that's not really what I want to focus on there. I wanted to focus on the idea of the whole the mindfulness. What are you doing in the now, right? How where mindfulness comes in is all these other moments of life where there's no reason to think about the future or the past. And the question is, how do you feel in the present? How are you doing with your attention now? How good do you feel now? How free of your problem are you now? That's what I've been focusing on. And sure, I'm thinking about my future. And of course I have to, because I don't want to just be a complete mountain man living off the back of my motorcycle forever. I would like my own home at some point, I think. I've also been thinking a lot about what is home. And I'm finding that whereas I used to be running away from home because that's where I had to, when my home was on Elizabeth Street in Manhattan, I was often running from it, trying to search for somewhere where I could find some peace. and I was having a hard time. But then I realized, like, oh, the pieces within myself, and that's what the past 16, 18 months or whatever have showed me. Certainly, like, 21 months since I went into treatment. I'm really learning that I'm finding peace in myself. So when I came home from Harmonica Fest and realized I was only going to be here for a night and I was going to have to go to Boise, I thought I was going to spend the night in Boise. Turned out I didn't, but I came back here, and that's all, like, I was like, it doesn't matter where I am. I'm at that place right now where, like, home really is where the heart is. And that's what I'm thinking about. And, like, how do I feel now in the present? Great. And when I do get stressed out, I meditate. I didn't meditate Sunday because I had to wake up first thing. And by the time I finished work for the day, I wanted to get home. And I thought about stopping my motorcycle ride to meditate. And I didn't. And then I didn't meditate yesterday. And then I was a little anxious yesterday. And I was talking to a friend. And, like, felt like I was just kind of, like, blabbering and just... sort of spilling out at the mouth to a certain point about issues and concerns and fears and feelings in general. And but for the most part, I'm finding myself centered, especially the more I meditate. But when he wrote about what happens when these plans you were looking forward to unravel, what happens when the vacation gets canceled, your flight gets delayed, or the destination is not as nice as you expected. And that really made me laugh, because there were a few situations in the past couple of years. Like, there was one day when I was at the Narita airport in Tokyo, and the flight got delayed, and I just watched everyone being upset and stressed out, and, like, there was another situation where a flight got delayed 4 hours. I don't even remember where I was. It wasn't in New York, but I was just waiting for a flight to somewhere. And both in those two specific instances, I remember people getting really upset, and, like, the flight got delayed so long they put out, like, the stack of sandwiches, and I was just overhearing people, like, on the phone, fucking just so angry, talking to people. And I just remember sitting there, and, like, people yelling at the gate agents about how the sandwiches sucked. And I just remember sitting there being like, yeah, but we're going somewhere, right? Like, we're flying somewhere cool. I was flying to Rome from Philadelphia, and I was like, I'm going to Rome. Like, I don't care if the flight's delayed. Like, eventually, this plane is going to take me to Rome. And if it gets delayed overnight and I sleep on the floor of the airport, who cares? And this was, like, during my time of major despair, where I wasn't feeling centered or in the now. But I think I've just always had that in me to a point. And I've always, like, I've had a lot of conversation with friends when things get canceled or don't go my way, and girlfriends especially are like, you always remain calm. And I'm like, well, I always have, like, I typically, especially when it comes to traveling, any sort of traveling, not just air travel, but traveling and, like, being on adventures, I always have an A, B, and C plan in my head. So if A doesn't work out, I just switch to B. If B doesn't work out, I switch to C. If C doesn't work out, then I just make a D. And, like, whenever something doesn't work out, like, what's stressing about it do? Why are you going to get angry that the hotel was overbooked or the room isn't nice? It's still a room, right? You're still where you wanted to go. Like, this one time I went to Miami, March 2017, because it was raining really bad in New York. It was going to be raining for like a week, and I didn't want to be in the cold anymore, and I just moved back from London. So I went to Miami, and I was like, I'll just find a fucking hotel when I get there. And I just figured I'd find something on Hotels Tonight, or hotels.com or something right on Miami Beach. And I was just wanting to spend time on the beach and, like, sitting by a pool and having people bring me margaritas. And I landed, and there were almost no rooms available because it was spring break. And I didn't know, but it was Black Spring Break. So it was, like, just bedlam when I got down there. And the only rooms I could find were like $500 or $600 a night. And at the time, that wouldn't have been a big deal for me to spend. But I was like, I was hoping to find a cheap deal. Like, I should have thought that it was spring break, but I didn't get mad. I just went and stayed in a hostel. I paid like $32 a night for a bed in a hostel, a bunk bed in a room with 4 sets of bunk beds. So I was sleeping with 7 other people. But I didn't care. I was like, yeah, I wanted to be on the beach sipping margaritas, but I'm still in Miami Beach. I'm in South Beach. It's still fucking gorgeous weather, So I just wandered around, and that's the night where I went to see Joe Rogan during that trip for the Late Show at the Fillmore in the Miami Fillmore, and I walked there, and I remember on my walk over there, I met this woman who was like, she was a white woman, and there were not many white people around, and she was like, we were walking together on the sidewalk, and she said something like, where are you headed? She was like, oh, that show's not going to get out till midnight or whatever. You're not going to want to be on the street. Just head straight home. She's like, by the time you get out, it's gonna be fucking, all hell will be breaking loose. And I was like, really? And she's like, yeah, there might even be stray bullets. She's like, I'm headed home right now. I'm a local every year during spring break. This is nuts. And I kind of laughed it off. And then the show did get out at midnight, and I got out of there, and I was like, oh my goodness. But I just laughed about all of it. And I saw a couple fights on the way back, and people screaming at each other, and like people twerking, stopping traffic, and the police just looked completely overwhelmed. And it definitely felt dangerous. But I was like, well, danger is my first, middle, and last name, obviously. So I ended up making it back to the hospital. But there's so many situations like that where you're like, well, shit happens, right? Shows get canceled, they get taken away, and yeah, you're not always going to live in the now. You're going to live in the future, but like that's the time to remember how important mindfulness is when something distressing happens, right? And when you get bad news or sad news, or you get information that changes what you had planned. And whether that be a vacation, whether that be a concert, whether that be a job, you didn't get hired for a job. Like, do you want to live in that despondency for a long time after it happens? Or do you want to just figure out what to do instead, right? Like, what if you go to the grocery store and they didn't have the brand of fucking coffee you want? You gonna let that piss you off? Like, a lot of people will. But like, do a few breathing exercises. Do some box breathing. You know, do the 4-7-8. Like, just chill and just realize, like, nothing really matters. It's all gonna be fine. You're alive. Do you have your health? What's that thing Confucius said? A healthy man wants 10,000 things. A dying man only wants one. So, like, as long as you're healthy and alive, just remember that, like, yeah, you may want a lot of things, but what do you need? What you need is to be able to laugh at yourself in times of trouble. You know? Speaking words of wisdom. Let it be. Just, shit goes down that you're not stoked about, just let it be. You know? Unless it's something you can personally control, like the flight gets canceled, are you an airplane mechanic? You know? Are you a pilot? No? Then what are you going to do? Are you going to fly the plane? No. So just let it be. Who cares? And go get vaccinated if you haven't already, would you? Come on. Stop fucking around. Anyways, that's it for the week. I'm going to go get my COVID test. I was going to say I'm going to tweet it, but I'm not going to tweet it if it's a positive result. So I don't even know if I'll tweet if it's a negative result, because it's really nobody's business. Not on Twitter anyway, but I feel like I owe it to you, my listeners out there. Anyway, yeah, that's it for the week. I'm back here in McCall. I'm home until Thursday morning, at which time I'll be riding my balding motorcycle tires over very treacherous dirt road mountain peaks, and hopefully getting a new set of tires next week. But it's all going to be fine. What's the worst that could happen? You know what I mean? Plenty, actually. But in the end, like, everything's going to be fine. Exactly. What's the worst that could happen? Let it be. Laugh at yourself. I'm certainly good at that. I love laughing at myself. I love laughing at other people, too. Even though it may not be nice and polite. But I do. Anyway, I got to be out of here in 11 minutes to make my COVID test appointment. Peace. God bless you. Keep your feet on the ground. Keep reaching for the stars. Inshallah.